Some episodes feel especially close to the heart, and today's conversation is one of them. My guest is Glynn Chambers, a psychologist based in Bendigo, Australia. Glynn and I go back quite a few years to his time at the University of Queensland, where we first connected as colleagues and friends. Since then, he's gone on to do meaningful work as a psychologist, but also more recently to share something deeply personal, his experience of being diagnosed with cancer. What makes Glynn's story so powerful isn't just the diagnosis itself, but how he has chosen to meet it, with honesty, insight, and a good deal of heart. He writes a moving blog on Substack called Psych With Cancer, where he reflects on the emotional and psychological terrain of illness. And he's also the host of a podcast brilliantly titled Chemotional Rollercoaster that explores the ups and downs of cancer, life, and everything in between. In this episode, we talk about the moment everything changed, how his relationship with compassion and self-compassion has evolved, and what it's like to move between the psychologist and the patient. And so I bring you Glynn Chambers. All right. Glynn Chambers, welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It feels like we're getting the band back together 15 years from 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah.
Gosh, time flies.
I remember sitting next to you. You were the coolest of all the supervisors, like Stan. Stan's the man. I was the rookie there being like, one day I'll be like Stan and Kim Halford. They were the goal.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, if there was any cool, it sort of, yeah, it's taken a dive by about now, I think. You know, there's cooler ones that have come
Taken
up.
over.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Been
Exactly.
dethroned.
Yeah, unfortunately. But anyway, such is life. But mate, you've been just so generous with sharing your experiences, you know, with cancer and your sort of diagnosis and treatment and the sort of the physical but the psychological journey of all of that. And you have a great Substack, Psych with Cancer, and your podcast, Chemotional Rollercoaster. So
Wow.
I practiced that because
Well done.
it's such a good
Yeah.
such a good and evocative name. And I remember you said on perhaps the first episode or something, you know, like if you're going to go through something hard, make something good out of it, I suppose,
Yeah.
is sort
Yeah.
of one of you're a big believer in that. So tell us about your mission with all of this.
Yeah. Look, I thought pretty early on, you know, our men's mental health. We're all about men wanting to speak up more. And I thought pretty early on, one, I'm a pretty vulnerable person, willing to share my experience. Two, yeah, I've got my psych background. And I sort of thought, you know what? Great for a man to model that it's really okay to open up and talk about what it's like to go through something. And two, I thought, you know what? Also great for a psych. And I actually had to do a bit of a journey of, is it all right for a psych to, how much disclosure am I okay doing as a psych? And went through the thinking because I thought, not just a bloke to model that it's okay to talk about your stuff, but actually for a psych, as thought leaders in mental health as we are, to go, actually, here's a psych talking about what it's like to struggle and go through things and share the journey. But I had to do a bit of a wrestle of, am I okay with that? Is this a no? Is this an ethical no? You know, how does this go bad? And I had to do a bit of reading about it to realize that every listener is a potential client. I think, okay, is this right? Right. And I read something one day that said something like, psychs can be so concerned about following the rules black and white that we may not always do the good things. I'm like, yeah, well, this would be a great thing if I feel like I'm allowed. And then checked with a few key people. They said, what a great thing to do. So I love it. My whole goal is, how do we make it easier for the next person coming through? And I would love it that someone would feel slightly more understood or slightly less alone in their journey through maybe hearing mine if they're in some sort of similar scenario. It's a pretty isolating thing, having cancer. It can feel like you're the only one going through it, when that's obviously not true. But yeah, the idea that someone would feel encouraged and seen and heard would be awesome.
It's funny that not funny, but you kind of described yourself before as a vulnerable person, and perhaps the other word that springs to mind really for me is that you're a very courageous person. I mean, the vulnerability to be able to share or to express and put into words the ups and downs and the sort of the really hard, challenging, difficult, slog, is kind of expressing the vulnerability, but just takes a lot of courage really, and so you sort of a courageous person in your vulnerability, and yeah, it's really about trying to kind of be helpful, I guess, and to
Yeah,
sort of that common humanity piece. It's hard. It is sort of isolating as much as it is a sadly kind of common experience. The
yeah,
actual person's experience is kind of feels like a lonely one, and to
yeah.
hear the experience of others can be really
Mm.
powerfully helpful and good.
Yeah, I wonder if psychs in general are courageous people. Like, I don't know, I haven't thought about it before, but sometimes I step back with my colleague at work and go, our job's pretty tricky. Like we really get in there in the weeds with people, and it's hard work. And some days I think there's other jobs that I think, oh man, I'd love to go do that. Sometimes I think about going to be a bricklayer, and I go,
Mm,
bricks are in the pile, bricks are on the wall. I'm like, oh, it's done. I know I did a great job today. It's like the bricks are nice and straight and level, uh, and I think that's not our role. Our world is we sit with the unknowns and we get in there with some pretty hard, scary things. So even professionally, yes, I think we're courageous folks in the work we do, and I appreciate you calling me courageous. I've I've realized that to be brave is actually a value of mine. My values
mm,
got clarified in this treatment cancer world.
mm,
Um, I realized you've got to be a little bit afraid to be brave, don't you? You don't get to be brave unless you're a little bit a little bit scared. So
mm,
yeah,
mm.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, compassion and self-compassion, often courage is the key, to be able to move towards suffering and try to be helpful, whether that's in our work and kind of moving towards suffering and being there and being with people and kind of listening and so on in the presence of their suffering, or whether it's kind of being able to move towards our own, I suppose. And so yes, courage is often the key.
mm. There's more
Yeah.
courage in adulting than I ever realized. I've recognized
Yeah.
once you hit 30, it's like, hang on, boys, life's getting a bit rough, a bit rocky post 30. I'm like, yeah, your courage gets dialed up. I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wait till you're post 50, mate.
yeah,
Then
no,
it ramps. You've written and spoken about your diagnosis. I wonder if you could take us back to that, or to that
yeah,
moment even, but
yep,
but also those early days. What what
yeah,
what
happy
what's the
to.
story there?
Yeah. Well, you think you're still young and fit, and I was, and I still am. But so I was 37, and it was pre-Christmas, and I actually just found like two little slight bumps, one around here in my neck, uh, that I could feel is pretty obvious, and then I went north of that, just below my ear, and felt just another little one, about the size of a pea, probably felt like. And I
Mm,
thought, oh, that's probably not right. And my dad had been part of my dad's legacy is men don't go to the doctor enough. Always go to the doctor. So I'm like, all right, I can hear dad in my head. Went to the doctor, and it was multiple tests that were all relatively inconclusive, ultrasounds and blood tests and things. And it ended up at go see this surgeon. The only definitive way to know what's going on is to have a surgery and take these two lymph nodes out. Um, we knew they were lymph nodes. We just need to rule out. We've ruled out everything sinister. We just need to rule out this lymphoma. Probably isn't. The GP says probably isn't. There's lots of reasons your lymph nodes can swell, but anyway. So I get a I get a surgery, and 2 weeks later, I 2 weeks later, I caught the day I was not getting cancer because I was 37 and fit and healthy. And I go
mm,
back to the surgeon's office to get my dressings off. And he was going to tell me, yeah, look, you just had some swollen lymph nodes. Pathology says there's nothing wrong. It's fine. I was that confident. My wife was with me just in case it went south, but it wasn't going to go south. And I was so confident. I had my 4-year-old daughter with us, pigtails, and she's in the consulting room in the surgeon's office in the back, sitting on that little table they have with the headphones on and the iPad. And she's having a great day. Unfettered iPad access for as long as she wants while mum and dad have this conversation. And yeah, and he he says,
Mm.
well, there's presence of the such and such and such cells, very sciencey something. I'm like, help a psychologist out. I have no idea what you're talking about. Do I have cancer or not? And he said, well, yeah, you do. And uh, then the world feels like it flips upside down. And it's a couple of minutes later, you're out on the street and just burst into tears in the front yard of the surgeon's office, and
Mm.
4-year-old daughter in tow. And my wife's doing a stellar job scurrying her along. And she says, let's just get back to the car. And we get back to the car, and the two of us just sit in the front seat, and the little one's in the back. She's blipping on her iPad, and we're in the middle of like the laugh, the cry, the what is going on, and we're just trying to process this world-shaking news. And 5 minutes, we're probably just sitting there, just sitting in this new reality. And then a little voice from the back, the 4-year-old, as she's got it, extra loud because she can't hear anything. And she's blipping away and she goes, this is the best day ever. Mum and dad all to herself, all the iPad, and we're both of us. And you
Yeah.
can't not laugh because I can see it from her point of view. It
Mm.
was a wonderful day. Mum and dad all to herself. The big brothers are at school, all the iPad. And for me, it was just a world shaking day.
Mm.
So, yeah, it was pretty wild. My wife was there with me, and I'm really glad she was. I had clients booked in that afternoon. That's how
Mm.
much I was not getting this thing because I was fit and healthy. And then I'm sitting there saying, well, what do I do now? I guess I go back to work. And she says, no, you don't go back to work the day you get diagnosed with cancer. You go home.
Mm.
And wise, always, I
Mm.
married up. You got to marry up,
Yeah. No, well
so
done with that.
cancelled the afternoon and went home. And even
Yeah.
then it was, oh, hey, you better go home. Your wife's husband just found out. Your wife just found out her husband has cancer. You better go home. And it's like no thought in that moment of you just found this out. I was so, and as I've reflected on a lot, I think it was a lot about, I'm going to take this in my stride. I'm going to not let this derail the person I want to be. And I think it was, yeah, I'll go back to work. I'll go home and support my wife. And I think a great part of the journey, I think, has been that attitude is not incorrect. How can I keep being me in the journey, in the treatment process and all of that? And how can you also acknowledge that this is pretty hard for you, and um, how can you be okay to drop your bundle? And that's okay. And I probably didn't want to, and then I did. And
Mm.
so it's been a real learning journey, honestly, a real learning journey of 12 months.
Mm. 12 months down the track now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
it was probably, so I got diagnosed at Easter 2024.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
What was that? You can let me know as much as you feel comfortable. But what
yeah,
was that like in that sort of actual moment where the surgeon says, "Yes, you do." Like what was it like in the body?
yeah,
What went through your mind?
yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever, those, it's kind of the cliche thing on a TV show where somebody hears some news like that and then everything sounds like a muffle. You don't really hear much more after that.
Oh, yes, I know. Yeah.
It was a lot like that.
Right.
And it was a volcano of emotion and tears wanting to come out that I was keeping the lid on. Um,
Mm.
I was probably in the surgeon's office for another couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. And then I had to go and talk to the receptionist, and it was an awkward, I just want to get out of here as fast as I can. And she's asked me questions of, will you follow up with this doctor? No. Will you follow up with some other doctor? Yes. Who is that? Oh, I don't really know. I must have looked out of it
Mm.
because I wasn't thinking well. I wasn't thinking clearly at all. But it really was this urge I just need to get out of here to be alone with my wife to process, what is this? And it really was, the best way to describe it is your world flipped upside down because cancer has a bad reputation. All the you bring with it. Okay, you hear the word cancer, that is loaded with, okay, what does that mean? And I probably had naive perspective on what it meant. cancer, it's either going to kill me or it's not, and I'll do chemo and I'm going to spew and go bald and it's going to be awful, and that's the worst thing ever. And so you have all this laden stuff with when you get a diagnosis like that. And every cancer, I've come to learn, is so different, and every treatment approach is so different. And but yeah, it was a world. It was a world flip. Is probably the
Yeah.
best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, just sort of lurching upside down sort of thing, and kind
Yes.
of the world kind of, yeah, goes muffled, and you're trying to just process
Absolutely.
this almost unfathomable sort of news, and
Completely.
what this will mean. And it was, yeah, this both and thing that you were referring to, both being, sort of sticking with your values, being the person you want to be, not letting this perhaps stop you, and at the very same time knowing that this is knocked your socks off, and it's
Yeah.
going to, sort of, there'll be some really tough times where perhaps
Absolutely.
you're not yourself, and that sort of thing. You talk about acceptance.
Yeah.
Tell us where that sort of maybe fits in with this experience, but maybe just also in life, and the
Mhm.
things that life throws at us.
Yeah, I've had to do a lot of reflection on acceptance, and I like to be able to put in my PD log, 12 months of cancer, I'm exempt from PD for the next 12 years, because I've learned so much firsthand experience. And the day I come back to when I think about acceptance was, I ended up at a colleague's house whose husband has something similar, a form of lymphoma that's different than mine, but uh, sitting with them for a couple of hours, hearing about his experience. And I realized that by that point, that was probably a few months down the road. Um, he was the first cancer patient I'd actually gotten chatted to. I think
Mm,
I probably had a naive illusion that you get diagnosed with cancer and they say, and here's the support group.
right.
Those support groups just aren't everywhere around every corner. That's actually not the way it goes. That's how Hollywood will portray it. But there's some around there, but not for everything. And so, really realizing this is the first time I've really had a good yarn with someone in a similar process. And for him, what had happened was he'd had treatment 10 years ago and had now come back. The nature of my cancer is that it's considered incurable but treatable. It will respond to treatment quite well most of the time, but it's likely to come back throughout my life. So that's a bit of a yuck pill to swallow. Well, I'm
Mm,
sitting here chatting with this gentleman 10 years down the road in treatment again. And I came home this day and just felt all kind of topsy-turvy swirl of emotion. And I just went and sat on my back veranda to just process, what is this feeling? And it was very angry. I was like, there's a lot of anger here. And it was a fantastic journey to look back on. I end up in the kitchen sobbing all over my wife's hoodie and big wet patch on the shoulder, uh, and processing it all. It's like, what is this feeling? I was like, well, this feeling is I'm angry that I'm having feelings, because I thought I've been in this journey for a few months. I thought that I had accepted this, and here I am feeling scared about it again, and having feelings about having cancer. And now I'm angry at myself for having feelings. And I was like, what's your concept of acceptance here, mate? And I've realized I had this innate sense of, well, to accept something, to swallow the pill that you've got this diagnosis means I'm so used to it, I'm over it, I've got no feelings anymore. So I was grumpy at myself that I was having feelings about having cancer because I was 2 months into it and thinking that I should be fine with it. And suddenly I'm not fine with it again because I'm maybe being shown a picture of me 10 years down the road, perhaps. And uh, I had to step back and sort of rethink the process of acceptance of this is a process. This is something that I don't think the goal of acceptance means you'll have no feelings anymore,
mm,
and it's funny because it's a different concept of it. I've preached, I feel like I've taught clients and talked for years about this concept. But then when I had to kind of live it myself, I realized I was trying to live it in a different way than perhaps what my head knowledge was. Uh, I was hoping it was going to be zero feelings. Acceptance equals zero feelings. And then uh, reality was just very different than that. And
Mm.
so really I came back to it's the true sense of making room for this in my life, making room for this feeling in myself, um, of accepting that, okay, of course you're feeling scared. Of course you've just seen what could be you in 10 years down the road. And uh, it's not a pleasant way to feel. Of course you're upset by that. And so yeah, but there was truly a bunch of extra suffering lumped on top because I just wanted to get rid of it all and didn't want to feel that way and was trying to use this concept of acceptance to just make it all okay. When it's like, no, I think acceptance means you can accept that things aren't okay at the moment. There's some
Mm.
parts of my life that don't feel okay. Um, yeah,
Yeah. You really hoped that acceptance was the goal, and that once you achieved acceptance, then
yeah,
everything would be sweet. But you
yes, and
realized that acceptance is the process. So
yeah,
it's the ongoing process.
and we talk about acceptance as being kind of the end of our grief, our wonderful Kubler Ross stages of grief, and so the end is acceptance. It's like, well, it doesn't mean. I went and did some more reading and again more PD and going. What resonated with me was when we've reached this, when we're sitting in this acceptance stage at the end of that journey, perhaps you have more good days than bad. I was like, that resonates with me. There's still some hard days in there. That doesn't mean that, oh, we're done with feelings. We're fine. We can talk about cancer and everything's wonderful. Oh, no problem. Cancer. Absolutely. It doesn't mean that. I think it's, I'm not really angry and I'm not really so depressed and I'm not, but there's still some hard feelings in there. And every now and again, something will come up, even still where I sit in the process now. And there's still some hard days in there that I have to just go, yep, this is probably part of the deal. Here's these intrusive thoughts that you're having, and okay, that makes some sense. There's some fear there. That makes some sense. We can let that be, and let's get on with our day, being who we want to be here, and we can make some room for this experience as well. That's probably where I'm sitting most days these days.
Yeah. Yes, it's acceptance of the ups and downs and the difficult feelings. It's
Mm.
it's probably even acceptance of the difficult feelings we have about the difficult feelings in a way
Yes,
too, and
yes,
we can't help but feel frustrated when we feel again distressed by the experience, and that
yes,
sort of it's kind of making space and room for the various layers that come and go, the sort of the basic feelings we have in response to this, the feelings we have about those feelings that come and go, and then the feelings we have about the feelings that we have about
yes,
the feelings. And it's multi-layered and complicated, but in some ways simple. It's about, just sort of an acceptance around and a making room for those things to
yep,
be there.
yep. It's an interesting.
Expectations.
Sorry,
Oh,
go on.
sorry.
Oh, it's an interesting journey because I think um, humans love to solve a problem, don't we?
Mm,
We have problem solving. We have a wonderful problem solving brain, and uh, if I feel sad, what can I do to fix it? If I feel, if I've got, if I feel anxious, what can I do to fix it? If I skin my knee, I got to fix. Like we fix it quickly. We got to fix it quickly, and um, there are some experiences in life that can't be fixed easily, and sometimes the emotional experience. It's helpful to step back and realize in this moment, this feeling doesn't necessarily need to be can't be fixed. Like you've got an unknown future, and that's a bit scary. And would you tell your kids anything different? Of yeah, the future is unknown. And that's hard to sit with, and it
mm,
is. And I want to fix it and make it all go away and make everything get back to this wonderful, happy homeostasis type thing. And I think just can't always be. And uh, but all that is thinking that this journey's really made me go on. And uh, as I sit here now, I can be grateful for that thinking and the journey and the lessons of that. At the time,
mm.
one of those hard experiences, you kind of go, I don't want it in the moment, but I learned from it afterwards.
Mm. Yeah, they're hard learned lessons, that's for sure.
For
And
sure are.
but where do expectations fit in, and what have you done there to be able to maintain, I guess, certain expectations or aspirations or things
Yeah.
that you would like to do and experience and achieve versus, holding expectations lightly, I suppose. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Expectation is a big thing. We could talk for hours about that because I think my mind goes a bunch of different places.
Mm.
Uh, One, I've thought a lot about expectation in terms of the future. I've thought a lot about expectation for my dad. My dad, years ago, he was a very wise man. He gave me this book, The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. Did you ever read that?
Yes.
Psychiatrist.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I'll confess, I read the first chapter about 6 times, never got past it because I found the first chapter so enlightening. I'd read it and go, I'd put it down and go, I just need to think about that and not move on too quick.
Right.
And I thought about it, and never got back to the book. And then about 6 months later, I go, I need to finish that book. And I read the first chapter again. I went through this process multiple times. But the first chapter, he's talked about, uh, it's sort of helpful to step back and recognize that life has suffering in it. And if we get stuck, if we get stuck in when suffering comes along, this shouldn't happen to me because I'm too X, too smart, too educated, too fit, too healthy, too young, too whatever. We can get really bogged down in that of the unfairness of it all and how wrong this is because I am X and Y. And this is the part, the chapter I remember. Uh, Versus when the suffering comes along, we go, kind of, here it is. This is the thing that I knew was coming at some point because this is an inherent part of life. I'll lose people. I will become sick. Things will go wrong. That's just the nature of the beast. And when we kind of learn to accept that suffering is a part of life, we can transcend it a little bit easier. I read that years ago and went, yeah, okay, hypothetically, sounds great.
Mm.
And that really came to my mind in this process of saying, all right, I've kind of been expecting some suffering to come at some point. Here it is. This is my lot. So that, for me, I found that helpful. What it led me to with that kind of expectation was not to get stuck in I am too X and Y, the unfairness. My mother-in-law asked me about, do you ever get stuck in how unfair it is? I was like, honestly, I haven't really, and I wouldn't begrudge anyone who does. I really wouldn't because I'm like that would be such a normal place for someone's mind to go. But because I've read this book and I had these expectations of life will be difficult. And I think up to now, my wife have been through the ringer with a few other things of life, interesting births and things that haven't gone to plan. And we've actually had a bit of an expectation suffering muscle has been flexed a
I
bit throughout
see.
our
I
life.
see. Yes.
Yeah. And so in that way, managing my expectations a little bit, stepping into this was a little bit helpful.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Then there's the other side of expectation of what do I expect to happen from here? And I honestly have no idea. Uh,
Mm.
I think in some ways you expect to live to, well, I expect to live to 80. My wife has wonderful genes and she keeps nearly spitting out her tea, being like, 80? What about 100? Like, because all of our grandparents lived 100.
All right.
And I I expected that. And so then you cop something like this at 37, now 38. And it does make you question, well, what's the future going to be?
Mm.
And hearing that you've got something that's likely going to come back again. And at some point, this could be in 2 years, 2 months, 10 years, 15 years, absolutely no idea. And that's an interesting space to sit in. And
Yes.
what do you die from? You chemo complications and it knocks out your immunity and a whole bunch of stuff. Like it's a pretty hard journey to go on the treatment side of things. And honestly, it's just our future is always a great unknown. Yours is, mine always was. Now it feels like it's a great unknown with a bit more certainty about this thing's probably going to come back, but maybe kind of sort of at some point. I'm like, so I honestly don't know. I don't know what to expect from here.
Mm.
And, but in some ways, my future is uncertain as it always was, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so now what it does is makes you go, gee, that sunshine's nice. Enjoy it. And I don't think that's a unique thing to me. To just the cancer makes you sit and really appreciate the present. Um, this cup of tea, great. This sunshine, so good in a different way. Um, yeah. Did you ever watch Did you ever watch the show The Good Place?
No, I don't. I haven't. No.
Ted Danson.
Yeah, I know the one. Yeah.
People go to heaven. But there's a part in that
Yeah.
where they realized that heaven was actually quite unsatisfying because it went on forever. So they changed the rules and said, actually, people might enjoy this a lot more if they kind of knew there was an end date. They could choose to
Right.
kind of leave this nirvana state. And in some ways, it's a little bit similar of, well, I've kind of been shown this show really doesn't go on forever. It's the mortality piece is right there. And so then you go, well, this cup of tea, enjoy that, really enjoy it.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of cancer patients who feel grateful to some degree for their
Mm.
diagnosis, for what it shows them about how beautiful life actually is.
Mm.
So I try to sit in
Gosh.
that position as much as I can now.
Yeah. No, you're right. That that one little word, expectations. It does. Your answer has really sort of surprised, but got me thinking in a funny sort of a way. You had sort of been a little bit inoculated by that early reading, and the road less
Yes.
traveled, and I don't know if that's quite the right word, but
Yeah.
you had reflected on and meditated a little bit on the idea that suffering is a part of life, and that created a kind of an expectation and a reality of life that meant that as things did happen and so on, that you were like, okay, well, this is
Yeah.
part of, whereas often where I kind of had sort of half thought you might go is just the way that we often have a whole bunch of expectations that for life that we hold on very tightly to, and then an experience like this suddenly, tears them all down as well, and expectations can be sort of tricky in that kind of way, and
Yeah.
but
And
then
I'd say that happened. I think
yeah,
um, I leave the surgeon's office that first day and come home and sit on the veranda with my wife, and we're swinging on the swing and having a cup of tea, and my 4-year-old's playing around doing things. And the
mm,
intrusive thought that comes in is, are you going to be at her wedding? And
right,
that over and over and over. And so you're right. You have these. I do have these expectations of, well, you'll have the same life trajectory as the average Joe. You'll grow up. Your kids will grow up. You'll see them get married and have kids, and you'll be an old grandpa, and that'll be great. And so that does happen. That you are faced with, wow, what all the things I thought was going to happen may not. And
mm,
there's some, the grief starts very early, and you start grieving this maybe kind of sort of potential reality that seems very scary and very not what you want.
mm,
Um, so there is that part of the journey too,
mm,
very
yeah.
much.
But the growth piece, you sort of it's kind of one thing that you can kind of take with you in a positive sense from all of this hardship is the
Yeah.
real connection with the present moment and appreciating, feeling grateful, really engaging with the things that are happening now, and
Yes.
the cup of tea or the sunshine on your back, or your daughter playing on her iPad, or your wife
Mm.
sort of smiling when you arrive home at the end of the day, or whatever it might be. Those become very sort of, yeah, kind of richly experienced, as
Yeah.
a I mean, you must be really loving this conversation, for example, Glynn, with me right now. This
Absolutely.
is this is the
Absolutely.
present.
Absolutely. No, and honestly, it's shown me how much the leaning into the present and sucking all the goodness out of it. It is an attitude. It's a decision. I don't think it's that you get cancer and then you suddenly a master at it. I'm like, wow, no, I've really realized how much it's a discipline and a practice um, to really lean into it. And the the few times, I was, a few months ago, sitting out in the back veranda with my daughter. Again, she gets all the credit. I have two boys as well. I just don't not talking about them. But my she loves a cup of tea. Actually, she's now 5, and she had this little jug of milk, and she had her tea, and she poured the milk into her tea, and she leaned over and she said, "Dad, look at the cloud coming up in the cup of tea. You know, the milk swirling."
Yes.
And I sat there and I thought, I know exactly what you mean, kid. And I have not appreciated that for a very long time. What a really
Mm.
cool experience that is. And similarly, my wife tore out in our garden a couple of months ago, tore out these sunflowers that had gone beyond blooming and looked all haggard and nasty. And she tore them out. And then as soon as she tore them out, behind these sunflowers was this beautiful Japanese lantern bush, and beautiful,
Mm.
beautiful bush. And I said to her, "Did you just put that giant bush there?" She said, "No, it was there the whole time." And I couldn't see past. I couldn't see past the gross dead flowers, the yuck part, to see the beautiful part behind it. And it wasn't even fully obscured. And it was such a good. I sat back and thought about it and went, "There's a that's an analogy about life. You know that
Yeah.
there is a there is in amidst the pain there. Yes, there's pain and there's the cancer and there's your chemo and your radiation, all your muck. And alongside that, at the same time, there's a lot of beauty all around you if you can
Mm.
choose to see it, and
Mm.
um, and both can be there at once. You know, the pain or the dead flowers can be there, as can the beautiful parts in the moment as well. And
Mm.
so, again, excellent PD in the present moment as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I love that analogy and how we sort of shift the spotlight, isn't it? And notice and honor and validate and kind of experience the perhaps the dead sunflowers.
yes,
And also find ways to shift the spotlight and to notice the other things that are also present in the
absolutely.
world and in our life and within ourselves
Mm.
and our kids are just such great teachers of
So good.
that and teachers of kind of mindfulness in a way, isn't it? I
Yes,
suppose and
absolutely.
but also the curiosity and
Mm.
delight really
Yeah,
that
in
they
very small
experience.
things. Yeah,
Yes,
going
yes,
for a walk in the bush, my 7-year-old, well, he's the guy who will stop and bend right down and look at the ants marching along. I was like,
yes,
I never make time to look at the amazing part of that. I'm like,
yes.
they make time for it and they show you, yeah, they really capture the beauty around them. Uh, they're probably not living in their head as much as I am about insurance and life and all the stuff,
Yeah.
all the bills, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Wh- How is your sort of thinking, understanding, practice, I suppose, of self-compassion? Because when we're talking about, I guess, acceptance and we're talking about courage and even sort of how we sort of work with our expectations and kind of stay present in the moment. I mean, one way to think about that, I suppose, maybe is a kind of a self-compassionate motivation is behind some of that. But what are your thoughts there in terms of self-compassion and how that's evolved for you through all this?
yeah. I think this process probably showed me I don't think I've been a very self-compassionate person. Um, it's probably revealed to me how I probably have a big inner critic. Said no
Hmm.
psychologist ever, right? Um, None of us with any of our imposter syndrome when we first start training, and uh, yeah, I realized early on uh, that I had a very, I think part of my grief process in this journey was very early on the watching the intrusive, what was going on upstairs in my mind was a lot of self blame of, uh, yeah, not, I never shook my fist at anything higher, the universe or God or life, or I never got angry at anything else that could have caused this reality. I observed what happened was where my anger and frustration and upsetness came from was actually at myself. I made this awful, mean assumption of it was a couple of things. You've done this to yourself, and this is the hurtful one that my mind said was, you've ruined your kids' childhoods. I'm like, whoa.
Mm.
And then my mind goes searching for what did you do that messed this up? What did you touch, inhale, eat, expose yourself to? You've messed this up somewhere. Very critical of myself. Um, no one has ever told me where this came from. That's just the opposite of compassion was what I observed happening. And that
Mm.
that was me looking, probably my mind looking for some sort of certainty or some sort of answer as to how do you get this at 37? Because go back to your expectation. It was so unexpected. It was so opposite to what I expected for the life stage I was in. I think if I had been 80, I have these expectations of, well, when you're 80, your body's been living a very long time and things start to really go wrong. I don't expect that at 37, right? So
Mm.
expectations are dashed. Therefore, I must have messed something up. My mind is very mean, and I really carried that around for quite a while until I engaged with a psychologist middle of all my chemo treatment. I had about 6 rounds of chemo, and apparently it's pretty normal when you're in the middle of it. You're in the middle of the long train tunnel, and the start of chemo is a long way back, and the end of it's a long way off, and you're in the dark tunnel. I ended up getting a psych and chatting this through with her, and she said to me some things that were really helpful. Acknowledged how it was a bit unfair of my mind to say what it was saying, and then she said, "You don't actually know that you caused this, do you?" So, no, I don't. And this was the thing that she was really helpful. She said, let's say you did know. Let's say you did. Oh, it was that one time you used a spray can and you didn't wear a mask, whatever. Let's say we could isolate it to something. Did you mean it? Did you do this on purpose? Like, of course not. And then we started talking about, it was really helpful for me to get this idea of being more compassionate to myself. I flipped it to said, let's say one of my children, or swap spots, with one of my kids. One of those kids were crook. And let's say they did something on accident that led to them being ill, getting an illness. And would I say the same things to them? What would be my attitude, my expectation? I would never say to them, you fool, you've ruined your body, you've ruined your childhood and your siblings' childhood. We're going to spend all this time at the hospital. No, I would never. So it was a really fantastic way of reframing to step back and realize how much I was butchering myself for something I had got no idea about where it came from, even if it was me. Gee, it wasn't on purpose. And gee, it's not helpful to be that mean to myself, and it was and then, so I started going and reading a bit more about self-compassion and realizing how much I can be quite critical of myself.
Mm.
And even in my psych practice, do I have enough compassion for myself professionally as I'm trying my guts out to do a great job for the clients I work with? Or no, so harsh, keep more, better, faster, and so it was another great lesson for me to step back and realize what my mind does, if left unchecked, where my mind kind of goes, and how that can kick me around.
Well, it's all just so threatening, isn't it? And threat system activating, I suppose. Like we can't help but have this rising up of kind of the threat system, and we slip into kind of self-criticism and sort of blaming and shaming ourselves, I suppose. And it's kind of like you say, it's really almost quite natural that the mind goes there, really, in that
Mm.
state. And it's interesting because even those who might have made a conscious choice around certain behaviors in the past, and then maybe that contributes to later medical
Mm.
problems and so on. I mean, even there, we're trying to disentangle. It's not my fault per se. It's sort of trying to think about. Well, again, like you said, the acceptance in a sense around suffering and life,
Mm.
and how these things happen. Just as a little curiosity,
Yeah.
uh, because the thoughts that came to mind about your kids, I mean, I can really imagine, that they are so important to us. How would you distinguish shame feelings from guilty feelings there? Would you disentangle those at all? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Did I feel shame in the process? That's an interesting question. I felt a lot of guilt. Yeah, I don't know if I felt shame there. Um, I'd say guilt was the really strong feeling. Guilt and anger at myself. I don't know
Mm.
if I felt shame throughout the process. That's where I'll,
Mm.
I'll reflect on it and write an email after when I go, oh,
Okay.
that one time. Yeah.
No, it's an interesting thought because guilt often does arise when we feel like we might have harmed or might harm someone that we really love or care about or
Yes.
are important to us. I mean, in some ways, guilt arises out of from a different emotion, really. It's or different motivation, maybe more to the
Yes.
point. It's kind of coming from that caring motivation, and you care for these little people so much that you sort of the last thing you want to do is to cause them some sort of distress or whatever it might be, and
Absolutely.
so we can't help but go to that guilty feeling.
Absolutely. And the process really, uh, I think I call cancer the great clarifier. I think it clarifies what's really important. And
Hmm.
it really showed me a lot of things about being an available dad and the type of dad. Um, that's what's when the chips were down. That's what's really important, and
Mm.
clarified a lot of things. And I stripped back. I did chemo and didn't work during chemo. I worked during radiation and the initial diagnosis period, and but it really gave me a lot of time to reflect on what really matters and how I spent a lot of time thinking through how do you want to step through chemo. Yeah, you can grit your teeth and bear it and get through. I did that, but what kind of dad do you want to be in this process? And that really came. My life got boiled down to be a few key things. Just be a great husband and be a great dad. And what does it look like? What sort of values is a great dad? And so it's not surprising that the guilt was really around my children and their childhoods and their futures because that's what was shown to me as being the
Mm.
most critical thing that I seemingly care about the most.
Mm.
Yeah,
Although, I mean, in a way, I suppose guilt can have a really constructive motivational force too. I mean, we obviously there can be really it's a very painful emotion as well, and sometimes it can be very overwhelming. And there's also this piece where it kind of helps to create focus and direction and
yeah,
what is important to me and what will I do from here that
yes,
hopefully will sort of be really helpful and
yeah,
to those that I love. Well, as a psychologist, you're sort of often giving compassion, and we've talked a bit about self-compassion, but there's been a few blogs and conversations you've had on the podcast, just thinking about the notion of receiving
mm.
compassion from others, and it can often be really difficult. It's a little bit about how do we open ourselves up to receiving it, and it's a little bit about how can we help others know what's going to be a
Helpful.
useful way to do it.
Mm. Mm.
What have you experienced there with receiving compassion?
Yeah. At first, a great mate at my hockey club said, "Hey, you're about to enter all this." I think he came over one day and saw me uh, post radiation. So I had radiation on my neck, and it was in my armpits and my abdomen. So multiple lymph nodes throughout my body had cancer in it. They zapped me in all these places, and they'd said, you'll have a really bad sore throat." It's like, no, I've had a sore throat before. I can handle that. This was like sore throat straight from the pit of hell. It was like the worst thing I've ever had, and lost my voice, and it was just raw. Swallowing water was excruciating, just like nothing I've experienced before. He happened to catch me in that moment, popped over to drop off something, and saw that I was just not in a great way. And he said, "Right, meal train. We're going to put the word out, and people are going to start bringing you food." And I couldn't swallow anything anyway, but my wife and I went through the journey of realizing, no, we're not the helpees. We're the helpers. We don't, no, that, and it was the thought process of we can cook our own food, like we can. Then we had to step it back and realize, yeah, but how great is it when you don't have to think about it as a grown up? Someone else does it for you, and it was a process of learning to let other people help, and a process of learning to be okay with people doing things for you, giving things to you when, um, yeah, when I could survive. It wasn't a survival. If it was a survival, like I'm dying of thirst in the Sahara and someone gives me a drink, of course I'm going to take it, be very grateful. When it's not at that extreme level, it was harder to accept it. Over time, I think that was like a muscle. I think we got better at it. Lots of people did lots of wonderful things for us in the process. And I think that idea of receiving compassion and help from other people, it got easier. I learned a lot of lessons about it. I think I did a whole episode on my podcast about it because I realized I did a lot of reflecting on how do I make this, how do I be a better helper out of this? When I'm out of this mess and I get back to my old role of being the helper, what have I learned? And I learned a lot in terms of when people are in the middle of something hard and we ask them, hey, what can I do? I think where our mind naturally goes is, hey, what can I do to solve the problem? And you go, well, you can't cure cancer, so there's really nothing you can do. And I actually think the better question I've learned, and I've trained my podcast co-host to ask better questions, and I think in that scenario, the better question is something like, hey, how do I help you cope with this? And just to, I can't solve the problem. And I learned the same thing in it when I was in a grief state. My father died a few years ago. Same thing, the same question of, is there anything I can do? It's like my mind said, no, because unless you can raise a guy from the dead, no, you can't. Like, but the better question I realize is, oh, hey, how do I help you cope? And then I also learned about the idea of, I talked about this example too. My brother came over and he said, hey, people are going to bring you a whole bunch of food really soon. You don't have enough room in your freezer. Can I buy you a freezer and throw it in your shed so that when all that food comes in, you've got the room? And I reflected on it after and I realized when people ask us, is there anything I can do? You don't really know how far they're willing to go. Whereas when I knew, oh, you're willing to drop hundreds of dollars to buy me something. Let's say I already had a freezer. Then I know, oh, you're willing to go that far? Mate, it's not actually the freezer I need, but if you're willing to go that far and spend those sort of dollars, I actually need a chair, that one of those chairs that kick you out like an old person, or whatever it is.
Yes.
They've shown their hand a bit more because you don't really want to be the one to ask for something big if they're like, oh, I was actually meaning, can I make you a cup of tea? So I learned a lot about being a helper and how to do it better when I'm in the back in the other role, which I sit in now. But going back to the original question about being a helpee, I also learned that if I didn't let people help and accept it, I robbed them of the gift of feeling like they could do something in their powerlessness. Your mates and your family are hurting, watching someone they love going through something, and they want to be able to do something. And if I rebuffed everything they tried to do for me, they just sat in their powerlessness. And I was like, oh, that's a shame for you. So yeah, lots of lessons there, I reckon, for me.
Yeah, no, there's sort of, yeah, I hear you. It's sort of, it's interesting to gradually get used to being in the helpy kind
Mm,
of role, and it takes a bit of getting used to, and it's sort of like almost like an exposure thing, isn't it? Where we
yes,
gradually habituate to the
yes.
feelings, the even fear, but certainly sort of the blocks and the resistances to being helped, and it takes a bit of thought and wherewithal to actually sort of gradually get more comfortable with receiving compassion. But there's also some, one of the skills, I suppose, almost of receiving compassion is being able to help others understand what they can do or what would be helpful, and to be able to express some of that. I really like there's just that slightly different languaging towards, what could I do to help you cope
That'll be
more
good.
easily at the moment,
Yeah.
and it just it sort of it just changes slightly the qualitatively almost the way that that question is received,
Yeah.
and sort of opens it up to more possibilities. And then the other little piece of wisdom is actually offering things more specifically too,
Yeah.
because that if you might say, can I bring you some food, and that then the person knows, this is where they're at, this is the kind of
Absolutely.
level of offering and so on, and they might say, well, not so much food, but
Mm.
any chance you could come and just sit with the kids tomorrow, and or
Absolutely.
whatever it might be.
Yes.
So it's
Yep.
so a little bit of specificity actually helps as well. And it is a kind of a gift of sorts. Yeah, I can see what you
Huge.
mean. It's people want to help. I often find it interesting because a lot of people feel really comfortable with being compassionate towards others, but then I sort of think, who are these others that we're being compassionate towards?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
everyone's
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, no, that
Yes.
sort of feels a bit more uncomfortable. But actually, yeah, if you can just sort of ease into receiving compassion, then it sort of is a gift all round in a
Yes.
way.
Absolutely. And it was a gift to my network when I would allow them to do it. Like it was a gift to me when there were people who did all sorts of things for me. From here's a bit of cash. Hey, we're celebrating a milestone. Here's some Uber Eats money. Don't cook tonight. Just or there was all sorts of things people did that were gifts to me. But yeah, it was a gift to them to say yes, because then they got the sense of I'm helping, and soothes their soothes their sense of, again, powerlessness. I'm like, or yeah, feeling like they're doing something. There's a
Mm.
gift both ways, I think.
Mm.
Yeah.
So many different emotions, I suppose, through all of this. You've sort of mentioned the anger
Mm.
and the grief and the guilty feelings, and you've kind of seemed to have alluded to a gratitude of sorts. That there are hard learned, but there's lessons in this, and there's growth that comes through it. I mean, also a kind of a good humor that you seem to bring to all of this, and your podcasts and your writing both are really quite entertaining in a
Thank
sort.
you.
I don't know, is that the right word? But
Yeah, no, that's
you know,
okay. Yeah, that's a good
the,
word.
yeah, no, it helps to bring humor in.
Yeah,
How do you make space for all of this, all
yeah,
of these different emotions? And how does compassion maybe kind of help with that?
yeah, yeah. Have I agree with you. I've tried to laugh my way through it as best I could. And do you remember being in high school when you would sitting? I remember sitting in maths, right? And you'd finally get to that maths problem that was so ridiculously hard that you just start laughing at the absurdity of how hard this scenario is. Like, I think I was laughing about this, and I had a bit of a. I have to laugh at the absurdity of this scenario. And we probably had some dark humor going on around our house for a while. My wife and my mom and I, you know,
Mm,
um, had some dark humor, and I think it helped us get through a little bit. Uh, and there's just scenarios that I think that just continue to happen that are humorous that we just kept acknowledging. That's actually still objectively quite funny. Or the kids saying some very self-serving comments in the midst of me going through something really difficult. Um, just stepping out of our scenario and seeing that this is seeing kids being kids and still being, there's one day my wife and I sitting by the fire, chatting about something pretty serious. Well, chatting about all this cancer muck and chemo and whatever we had to do. And my probably 9-year-old at that point comes in and says, "What are you guys talking about?" Sees our very serious faces. And I said, "Oh, mate, we're actually just chatting about dad's cancer." And he goes, "Oh, phew. Oh, I thought you were going to tell me I had to go have a shower." We're like, "No, mate, you're fine." Oh, good. Glad you're not worried. Thanks. It's
oh,
like all the way through, they see it from their point of view. And we
yes.
watched during radiation. We watched MasterChef every night because sitting around the dinner table chatting. I work during the day. I do radiation in the afternoon, and I'd come home at dinner time, and I just felt nauseous and gross. you know when you don't feel that great, you don't really want
Oh,
to chat that much. And so it was like, you know what, MasterChef, that sounds great. Everyone eat your dinner in peace. We're just going to watch this and let Dad just feel a bit mucky on the couch. But once we had finished radiation and I got through the week from hell, the bad throat, uh, the my daughter again, here she is again, said, "Oh, we're going to watch MasterChef over dinner tonight." And my wife said, "No, no, no, no. Back to regular family dinner. Dad's in a better spot." She's like, "Oh, I wish Dad would have more treatment." You're like, you, I get it, but you're a little rat. But you can't. You can not see those things. But I think life was more fun if you could step back and see the ridiculousness of the scenario or the funny things, the way they're viewing their
yeah,
world, and
yeah.
yeah. So, and
There's
there's a part of me that just didn't want to get bogged down in it too. I think there's a part of me that didn't want to let it be all that I was. I think that was part of it too. Of there's still life here. There's still childhoods to be lived. There's still a marriage to be had. For a while, there was still some work to be done. It's like maybe a refusal to let this thing take over my whole life and be all
mm,
that I was. I think, and in some ways, the treatment journey can turn you into a walking cancer patient, and that feels like that's all you are. It can
mm.
get that way. I think it's a pretty all consuming beast. One podcast episode actually told my co-host all the how many blood tests and how many pills and how many I went through it all. It's like no wonder it feels all consuming because
Mm.
it's very consuming. But I tried hard to not let it be all consuming at the same time.
There's something therapeutic about humor or seeing the absurdity of things or coming up with a fun little turn of phrase or
Yeah.
remembering a little anecdote with the kids
Yes.
and there's a sort of there still is a joyfulness I sense that you are approaching or really sort of
Mm.
both trying to, but also just it's arising in you that you're trying to still approach these things, joyfully in a sense, and kind of delight at life and all it's made up of,
Yeah.
not least with the kids. They are such a joy in that sense.
I've realized in trying to clarify what I'm about in my life, I've realized how much being playful is a value I want to keep living. And I realize I work with teenagers, right? Psych in a school. I'm quite playful in that too. At the right time, there's a playfulness there, but I'm very playful with my kids. And I've realized how much playfulness is important to me. And two, when I'm not playful, I'm like, oh, it's actually a bit of a canary in the coal mine. I realize when the playfulness goes, I'm like, oh, I'm not doing as well as I'd like to be doing here. And it's a good alert for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
So yeah, a very interesting thing to have learned about myself.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll let you go in a moment. I really appreciate your generosity with your time here, but also all of the other stuff you're contributing out there. If someone is sort of at the start of the journey, and perhaps has received a diagnosis, and
Yeah.
what and obviously. Yeah, we're probably not able to kind of fix things or take it away like you were saying before. Are there certain things that you would say or offer or invite
Yes.
them to sort of kind of think about or reflect on or what you'd like them to hear?
Yeah. Absolutely. This is the sort of question that uh, I'll have a great answer for this in about a half hour's time. The few good answers I'll give you now is this isn't the psych speaking. This is the cancer patient speaking. Don't Google.
Yeah.
Trust the
Uh-huh.
experts. I think there's so much online and so much changes quickly. And I think we can make ourselves really, really extra afraid and extra unknown swirling around. And uh, it's really so common to go looking for answers and certainty. I think looking for certainty is a really common experience. And uh, we can run away with things that we read online that make us feel a bit certain, but those certainties can be very scary or not accurate. And we need to be trusting the experts who know because things seem to be changing very quickly in this whole cancer space, from what I'm aware of. Um, So trust the experts and try not to Google too much. Uh, I have found incredible. I just found it incredibly helpful to be so open and vulnerable. Um, and that's not everyone's cup of tea. I'm very happy being quite open with my mum, my mates, my wife. But for some people, that's that they want to journal and like do it. But I think I was thinking about this, be a little bit more Johnny Farnham, take the pressure down, let it out somehow, like find a way, whether it's paint something, draw something, write something, talk. I found that for me incredibly helpful to let my headspace be known to the people around me, and uh, they wanted to know as well. My big two, my mum and my wife, they wanted to know how I was going, and it was relieving to them to know where I was up to, what I was thinking through. It was very helpful for me, and yeah, so those two things: take the pressure down, be a little bit more Johnny, get your mullet out with your Johnny Farnham mullet, and yeah, trust the experts, and I think breathe really well. And I think the last thing is, if it feels like the world is upside down, absolutely. And it's completely fair. And I don't think that feeling lasts forever. No matter what their prognosis or outcome is, um, things will feel a little bit more stable in time. I think that's typically how it goes. And there's a period there where it's a sleepless night, lots of them. You wake up early, your mind's on overdrive, your mind's in prediction mode. It's like, gee, that's a really normal part of the process. It's really hard and it's really normal, and it doesn't last. I don't think it lasts forever. So
Mm, mm,
trust in the normality of that, I'd say.
mm.
Yeah.
Mate, good stuff.
Yeah.
Really important stuff. Very moving.
Mm.
But and I will put the links to your various, well, your podcasts and
Mm.
your Substack and so on
Thank you.
in the description.
Yeah, great.
And all the best with your ongoing journey and
Yeah, thank
health
you.
and all that sort of stuff. And thank you for speaking with me on compassion in a t-shirt.
Pleasure. More, look, my pleasure. The more we can tell the world to speak up about this stuff, and I'm happy to do it. Very happy
Yeah,
to.
brilliant.